The cult sensation of Stranger Things is back. It's been just over a year since the show took the world by storm, and rightly so, because its first season really did feel like it caught lightning in a bottle. Everybody was talking about it. So could the show replicate that success a second time around? For me, that answer was a definitive yes. While it doesn't quite touch the heights of its first season, the quality is still clear as day. I mean, let's face it, it was always going to be a tough task for the show to match its exquisite debut season, but throw in a bigger expanding threat, a couple of new characters, and some of the same excellent storytelling, and you have a second season that is more than capable of living up to the expectations. Now, we left Stranger Things last year knowing that Will was still affected by what happened to him in the Upside Down. He told nobody else about these visions he was having or about that little thing that he threw up in his sink. But as the 1 year anniversary of last year's events was approaching, these very real visions he was having in that world brought more than just a Demogorgon into the town of Hawkins. You could tell immediately that the budget this year must have skyrocketed. I mean, the Demogorgon was impressive, and so was everything else that was shown off in the first season, but in the new larger threat of this shadow monster or the Mind Flayer, and us seeing it on a frequent basis, was an obvious case for the show being able to flex its bigger muscles to show off its other dimension. Now, a big part of this show's success was down to its all-around wonderful cast. Steadfast leaders Jim Hopper and Joyce Byers, played by David Harbour and Winona Ryder respectively, were once again incredible on screen. Jim is a character who you cannot help but root for. He's always looking out for those around him and protecting those he cares for, and he is someone who isn't afraid to venture into the unknown, quite literally, to find out some much needed answers. I mean, Christ, they had me really worried about Hop for a while this year. When he got wrapped up in those vines with no one around to help, I'll admit I was sweating a little. I'll talk about some character deaths a little later in this review, but the showrunners did a stand-up job of having me at least partially worried for the life of one of my favourite characters. Joyce, meanwhile, didn't find herself in the danger zone as much as the other characters did this year, but it's safe to say that her son was there from the very start until the very end. Oh well, poor lad, you just cannot catch a break, can ya? Rooted by fear, Will was haunted by these visions, possessed by the Mind Flayer, and all in all had a pretty shoddy year. Worked wonders for the kid playing him though, because if Millie Bobby Brown was the standout young actress for last year, Noah Schnapp was 100% this year's top young actor. Impressive is an understatement for some of those possessed scenes that played out on screen, but take nothing away from the equally impressive kids of Mike, Dustin, Lucas, and partly new party member Maxine or Max. As a new kid breaking into an established group of friends, it's always tough. Mike was a bit of a douche in that sense this year, feeling that Max was trying to take Eleven's place. But Max's inclusion did bring out some more comedic segments between the other two, with Dustin and Lucas arguing all the time. Now, the Demogorgon was essentially the main antagonist last year, but aside from the monster realm of terror, we did have Hawkins' lab where essentially everyone in it was evil as well. Dr. Brenner, or Papa to 11, was seemingly killed off, but there were some hints in a couple of episodes this year that his fate could still be left in the balance. But a little more on that later. This year the lab was cleaned up, restaffed, and ready to fight off whatever came out of that gate. Well, at least they thought they were ready. New head honcho Dr. Owens was in charge now, and at first he did seem like he was hiding information and had a hidden agenda. I thought he was only complying and playing nice to Hopper for face value at first, because he kind of replaced Brenner in terms of having a human antagonist. That was until everything turned into a disaster in episode 8, where he assisted our main characters as best he could and nearly died himself. Those final 2 episodes though, they were hands down some of the show's best. Aside from all of the action happening, Eleven had been hiding for far too long, and when our group was in dire need, she showed herself in an emotional reunion with Mike and the rest of her friends. Elle's story, to be honest, was a little muted this season. Hopper was trying to protect her, and you can understand that, but we had to wait till the very end of the season for her powers to be fully on display when she descended down into that hole. She used every ounce of strength she had to close that gate, even blocking the shadow monster which was trying its best to put a stop to her. And the gate may have closed and the shadow monster stopped for now, but you can bet whatever still lives inside the Upside Down will find a way to escape and will wreak havoc when it eventually does. My overall verdict for Stranger Things Season 2 is a very, very high 8 out of 10. The acting, characters and story were all around outstanding once again. Some of these young actors and actresses are going places, I tell ya. The group of 5 or 6 kids were exceptional, with Will being the standout for this year. Part of what made this show become such a cult sensation was its throwback feel to the 80s, and that feel was still fully alive throughout this year's run. We even got some overdue acknowledgement for characters such as Barb, and it was long overdue, though I must say the internet could have played a big part with that one. Barb's injustice was really the entire story for Nancy and Jonathan this year, with the pair looking to expose those in Hawkins' lab for attempting to cover up the true circumstances of her death. As mentioned, the budget was clearly much deeper than before, with the Upside Down and the Shadow Monster appearing on a regular basis. There wasn't as much keeping the monsters hidden in the shadows as there was in Season 1, and god damn it Dustin, that little pollywog as he called it ended up being a baby Demogorgon, or as they were known in the growing phase, a Demodog. And there wasn't just one of them. Episode 8 took the spot of my favourite episode of the year, with the finale coming in at a close second. Just the crisis erupting inside the facility with the staff being mauled left and right, then watching what happened to Bob really did give you the horror atmosphere that this story incorporates. Overall, this season felt much darker in tone, and not to jump on the bandwagon, I've seen many people voicing their displeasure regarding it, but episode 7 did feel drastically off for me. It was my Achilles heel for this season, and it utterly butchered the pacing that had gathered. It was tonally off and should, if anything, have been swapped around with episode 6. But what we got was that cliffhanger as the Demodogs were about to breach into Hawkins' lab. Then we got a drastic diversion for an hour where the only character that we knew about was Eleven as she looked into her missing sister. By the episode's title, The Lost Sister, you knew kind of where the story was going. Eleven having someone with her in the lab being tested on at the same time, someone else who had these kind of abilities gave her a bond to try and form. Her name was 8, and the episode will likely mean more in the long run of the show than it does right now. I mean, even if you accidentally skip the episode, all I will say is that you would not notice. Still watch it, as I feel it will be planting a seed for episodes in the future, but in my opinion, for those writing the show, try to keep Hawkins in the mix at the same time, because that's where the heart of the show is found. Right then, let's talk about the MVP of the season. We have 2 picks. In one hand, we have Bob the superhero, and the other, Steve the babysitter. Both of these characters I had down for them to not make it out of this season alive, and I can say that thankfully I was wrong at least about one of them, and the one who didn't end up making it was Bob the superhero. Sean Astin's character was a welcomed presence in this world. He was light-hearted, funny, and made all those around him just happy. Joyce especially, and it was because of that, as soon as the sequence at the lab had Bob go off on his own to reset the power, I knew then that his fate was sealed. He was close, so close to making it out, only to get caught by one of those Demodogs just before the front door. That scene was one of the tensest scenes I have watched in a long time, and with almost the whole main cast in the same location, Bob was unfortunately one of a few expendable characters. They called him a superhero, and he went out like one in his final moments. Bob was close to being my MVP for this year, but he was beaten by this man, Steve. Steve was awesome. His pairing with Dustin was dynamite. Easily the best and funniest partnership this year. You hated Steve early on in season 1, but now every moment he's on screen, he owns it. He puts up with Dustin a darn sight longer than I would have done, and in the face of danger, he is not one to back down. That's why when he was in those tunnels with the kids, I thought it would be his last hurrah. pushing up Dustin only to get caught by the Demodogs on their way back to the centre of the hive. Plus, his death would pave way for Nancy and Jonathan's romance, but hey, I am glad that he made it through once again, as I'm sure his character will shine again when the show comes back. The only character who had more screen time than I expected this year was Max's stepbrother, Billy. He was extreme, a prick, and someone who was a bit like Steve early on in the beginning of season 1. I wasn't a fan of him in the end, I must say, especially since his story went absolutely nowhere in the end. You thought that he was going to get maybe a bit of a redemptive arc when he was heading over to Will's place, but nah. So I would assume the writers are saving some sort of development for him later on in the other seasons. Well, one can hope. To wrap up, Stranger Things 2 is exceptional. It was slightly under season 1 overall in my book, but the show expands on pretty much everything that the first season had built. Threats were ramping up, and the show's visuals and special effects were going along with it. 8 and very possibly Dr. Brenner could feature in the later seasons, with a sister-sister team-up probably on the cards. When will it be? Well, I can't see the show going past 5 seasons, and you don't want to drag it out either, as I'm sure many of you have seen it happen before to one of your favourite shows. 4 or 5 seasons at this point seemed optimum, maybe even 3 depending on the story that they go, but we'll have to wait and see what the threat of season 3 brings. So how did you feel about Stranger Things 2? Who was your MVP for this year? Was it Bob, Steve, or was it somebody else that I failed to mention? How did you feel about episode 7? Did it break the momentum which the show had gathered, which episode 8 was thankfully able to recover from? Or did you actually quite like it? And lastly, how many seasons do you envision this show having? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. And as always, thank you very much for watching. Please leave a like, comment and subscribe if you enjoyed the review. And I'll see you on the next one.
Hey! Dickheads! How come the only one helping me out is this random girl? We lose late in 40 minutes. Let's go. Let's go, I said.
All right, assholes. God.